Hello. So I'm going to go today and try to estimate the world's population before the last major cataclysm, the Great Flood, also known as the Younger Dryas, and then I'm going to give some reasons for that. So the first thing to note is that some very smart people have estimated the population after the Great Flood at 400 million. And a lot of people have assumed that was the population before the Great Flood. It might have even been less than that. Now that's a bad thing to do. So if you don't know about the Great Flood, so what happened is that Earth's atmosphere became thinner. Now this was, according to Sumerian tablets, as a result of overpopulation and mass pollution. And they've written that down. They wrote that down pretty much at the time. So 10,000 years ago they wrote that down. And they said that was as a result of overpopulation and pollution. The same things we're dealing with now with a population of 7.7 billion and with technology at the level it is today. So we often link pollution with a combination of technology and population. The higher the technology, the more the pollution, and the higher the population, the more the pollution. So if we have the greater the pollution, I should say. If we have a low population and low technology, we're going to produce almost no pollution. Nobody's going to care about us. So for us to have had a cataclysm that was described by the Sumerians, and they were the most advanced population at the time, they were our first people to have religion, and for them to describe it as being as a result of pollution and overpopulation, we have to suggest that that's probably got some truth to it. So we'd have to suggest that the population was at a similar level to it is today, or perhaps even higher, and that the technology was at a similar level that it is today, or perhaps even higher. So that's the first step. Second step, as we're saying, so it was 400 million before, and if you've read your Bible, or if you've read any other religious text that talks about it, every religion talks about this, they will describe the Great Flood as a devastating effect that absolutely destroyed every part of the world, and some places it killed everybody, and it was a mass extinction event. So they describe it as killing 99% of all animals and plant life on Earth. And we have to assume that perhaps humans were lucky or unlucky. Could be more than 99%, could be less than 99% of humans. We know for animals and plants it was 99%. 3/4 of them went extinct. So if we say 99% of humans had died, and that's our starting point, and we have 400 million before, then we have to times that by 100. 400 million times 10 is 4 billion. Times 100 is 40 billion. So if we have a population today of 7.7 billion, and we have our starting point population, that's assuming that humans died in the same amount as animals and plants, that we have to say that the claims that the Earth's population is the highest it's ever been are foolish, stupid, obviously false, and just simply not true. So that's the first thing. Look, it might have been under 7.7 billion, but to say that we know for sure, we do not know for sure. And in fact, most likely it was bigger than it was now. We had more people around then than we have now. So that's the first thing to note. So the starting point is 40 billion. So second thing to note is that we know, and people have speculated, that a current population of 7.7 billion, if you push it out, we'll get to around 15 billion by about the year 2050, and then it will plateau out at around 20 to 25 billion, and it won't ever get much higher than that. So, and people have said that that's the level which the Earth can cope with without having major natural disasters. So 20 to 25 billion. So the first figure's 40 billion. That's the amount that we could have had that many, and then had 99% of the world die and still end up with 400 million. So the second point is 20 to 25 billion is the amount of people that we could have on Earth and still not be overpopulated. In fact, we could go up to 30 billion. I've heard some estimates say we could go up to 30 billion before the Earth starts to panic and push us out. So we're nowhere near that. Nowhere near that right now. So 30 billion. The other thing is, so why is the Earth, why did the population suddenly go up? So one thing is, so from the 400 million estimate until around about the 17th century, we went from 400 million to around 700 or 800 million. So we doubled, and it took that long to double. And then we went from 800 million to 7.7 billion, which is 10 times in about 300 years, and double in about 11,000 years, roundabout. So 11,000 years to double, 300 years to times by 10. So that's a big difference. If we had times by 10 every 300 years, from 400 million, 11,500 years ago, we'd have a ridiculous population. I don't even want to estimate it. Maybe we would have gone 4 billion after 300 years. We'd be 40 billion, 400 billion, 5 would be way too big. But the reason why we've gone up so much is because we had advances in medicine, people were living longer, and they were still having so many children. But if you look at populations that have had, or parts of the world that have had this boost before, then they slow down. Like for Australia, for example, we're not increasing our population particularly quickly, but parts of the world that are, for example, India and China, and parts of Asia. So they're increasing still because they do have that good healthcare, and parts of Africa still don't. So they're not really increasing very quickly. But once they start to improve their health and all the different factors, then they will increase as well. So even if China and India are probably towards the peak of their populations, we're still going to have Africa go up as well before we reach our peak. Africa's still not very highly populated, North Australia, but most of Australia's barren. So we will get up to, and how long will it take to get to 30 billion? Which I've said is the maximum we can get. Well, if they're saying it'll take about maybe 30 or 40 more years, and we'll get up to was around 20 billion, and then after that they're not expecting much more. So it may take 500 years to get to 30 billion, and then that's the most we'll ever get. In fact, we might never even get that many. And they're saying that's the sort of stage where we start to have Earth not be able to handle us. There's too many of us then, because we're quite big creatures compared to like ants or whatever small creatures. So something will start to happen once we get to those population numbers. So if you're talking about what the Sumerians described as overpopulation, they're probably talking about 30 billion. But they might be talking about 20. So then you say, well, how could that possibly be? Where'd all the bodies go? Well, the funny thing is that fish like to eat bodies. And if you had a big flood that pushed people into the oceans, sharks and other fish would have eaten them, and then the fish would have eaten other fish. And that's a pretty simple thing. So you wouldn't expect to find all these bodies. And in fact, over that amount of years, you expect in most cases for them to deteriorate, unless they've landed in like a tar pit or whatever it might be. So you wouldn't expect to see the full extent of them. And so we're left with a choice here. So did humanity spend 1 million years, or it depends on if you count hominids as also advancing, or did we spend 1 million years and getting from perhaps 20,000 to 400 million and never have that advance? Or did we have an advance that was then wiped out by a great flood? And did we have those advances regularly and be wiped out by cataclysms every 20,000 years or so? So there are your two choices. If you believe that the great flood was a natural thing and that hardly anyone died, and that the Bible's lying, and that all the physical evidence by geologists of how devastating it was, but they're all lies, well, then Earth's population was never that big. But if you believe that the religion and science and everybody else that tells you that the population was much bigger and that 99% died, we're talking about a population of 40 billion. Now we can work out who lived where, and we pretty much know. I mean, the place that's now Great Britain and Ireland used to be 10 times bigger and would have had a huge population. 1 billion is how they describe it, as having 1 billion. Now that might not be exactly accurate, but That's what they've described. They've got it written down. They say there was 1 billion people there. So, you know, maybe Atlantis had 2.5 billion, 3 billion. Egypt might have had 2 or 3 billion. You know, we don't know exactly how it went, but you know, maybe you're talking about Europe and Africa having much bigger populations than they have now. And you know, that's the sort of thing that we just miss out on. But how does this affect us? It's kind of like we shouldn't really be panicking as much as we perhaps are. Yes, we should be doing what we can to make climate better, but we're not expecting a great cataclysm in 50 years. I'm certainly not. It might be 8,000 years. It might even be 3,000 if we're really unlucky. And it might be that 99% of the population die and we go back down to 200 million. And so that might be that 99 out of every 100 people that listen to this will die. Of course, it happens in 3,000 years, 8,000 years, 18,000 years. It won't bother you anyway. But the people that are alive at that point, whenever it happens, are going to be devastated. It's going to be, if you survive, it's in many ways worse than if you died, because you'll have to put up with everything just destroyed. So that's it. And we could have had 40 billion people. We might have had 50. We might have only had 30. But we probably had more than we have now. And they died. And that's how devastating it was. Okay, so that's it for me. Bye bye.